All right, so Assalamualaikum everybody. Thank you for attending this webinar on how to apply for Y-Combinator. I'm joined by Salman, Allana, and Shoaib Khan. The three of us were in the same batch last year. So that was winter 22. So before the call officially got started, we were all kind of thinking about how quickly the year has gone by and how much of an impact YC has had on at least my company for sure. So before we get into the questions, and we want to gear this session more towards how to apply and application tips and tricks, I'd love to go and ask Salman first and Shoaib second to introduce themselves, introduce their company, maybe a little bit of, what their most insightful realization from being at YC was, and then we can get into the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ali, for that introduction. And like, this is definitely bringing back memories. Sitting at 10 p.m. At night on Zoom call with you two, like it feels like we're back on one of those YC group hours. So yeah, it's great to be back on this. Just a quick intro. So we're building modern logistics for online sellers in Pakistan. We work with people selling from shoes from their house all the way to enterprise level customers. And one of the it's tough to say like what was the one sort of realization from YC, but I think if I had to really draw on one, it was that like anyone can do it, right? Like and whatever the problem is in front of you, no matter how tough it seems, no matter how end of world something might seem, whether it's a crash, a product, losing a customer, whatever it is, you can get through it. You've got the tools as a founder, and you can figure it out. And learning that from people who've done it at a much larger scale and being much more successful, I think that gives like a level of confidence every day when at least I walk into the office.
Awesome.
Ji, assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Shoaib. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Markaz Technologies. Markaz is a reselling marketplace here in Pakistan. Basically, we enable anyone in Pakistan to come online, start their own business without having to invest anything in inventory. I completely agree with Salman that pinpointing one thing is very difficult. But I think one of the things that I felt throughout the batch at YC and even beyond that was that you really need to focus on the basics, and they have to be really, really strong. The kind of problem that you're trying to solve, the kind of customers that you're getting, what are their insights? You need to get those basics right. Everything on top, sort of starts getting built as time goes on. So getting the basics right is probably the most important thing that I remember from being at Y-Combinator.
Awesome. So maybe I'll do a quick intro too. I'm Ali. I'm the co-founder CEO of Agentnoon. We build workforce planning software. So we help companies figure out if they have too many people or too few people and how to figure out the right optimal mix of folks to get the job done. I think for me, the realization from YC is that I think as long as you're building and you're focusing on building something, it's very agnostic to your background and where you went to work or where you went to school. They don't care. Like if you're building something people want and you can demonstrate that in your application, that's it. That's really what you need. So why don't I segue into my kind of first question, which is, I guess, how did you decide to apply for YC? When did you know that you wanted to be a part of Y-Combinator? Anyone go first?
Yeah, so start. Oh, go ahead, sure.
No, so I remember, 2020 was the time that I sort of, had this thing in my mind that I wanted to do something on my own. It had been happening it had been happening since probably 2016. But I think, to be really honest, I did not have the guts is the right way to sort of leave my everyday job, leave the, very comfy life of, doing good in the corporate circle here in Pakistan. So it was difficult. But eventually, 2020, I decided that, there's something that, maybe there are a couple of problems that you can work on. So I had never been associated with any of the startup circle. I was probably not part of that in any way. Worked in the telecom sector here in Pakistan for a long while, and then I'd worked at Easy Paisa, which was not really a startup, but it was more like a venture-backed business that had sort of taken off. So probably joined Easy Paisa post product market fit. So I started reading up on what to do when you want to start something new. And I landed onto essays by people like Michael Seibel, landed onto essays like people like Sam Altman, Paul Graham, and YC sort of became like the cornerstone of all the knowledge that I wanted to gather. That is where I sort of understood that the way that YC values, I think in a completely, like you said, in a completely agnostic manner, it doesn't really matter where you're coming from, what you've done. There's a problem that you've identified and there's some form of a solution that you want to work on. They're going to consider it. Whether you make it to YC is obviously that's a separate job altogether. But that's when I sort of had it in my mind that my first go-to would be YC, and not only just because of that, but because of the fact that I went through in a lot of detail as to how their program was run. How were they focusing on building something every day? People were, sort of like founders who had gone to YC had come out with a kind of a regimen that really helped them, build products. So by design, I had it very clear in my mind that I, as a first step, wanted to apply to YC. And mind you, I applied thinking that there's no way in hell that I'm going to get in. So, I just applied and, then things sort of started happening one by one.
So, Salman, you want to add to
that? So for me, like we had been building Rider in isolation for a while. And, this was in 2021 where there was so much news, right, about people raising different rounds and all of that. And I thought, okay, that's like the next step for us, right? Is you raise an institutional round and then that solves all your problems and you figure things out. So we went out, we did our first institutional round, our seed round or pre-seed. And I realized, okay, hang on, that doesn't solve our problem, right? Okay, fine, you've got money in the bank, but it doesn't solve your business problems. So I started speaking to a few people and they said, look, have you thought about YC? And this was October now. And the applications were closing, I think like 4 days after or something like that for the winter. So I said, never going to get in, there was going to be no chance. Pakistani founded this, that, and the other. But okay, now I've got nothing to lose, right? Like literally there's nothing to lose. So put in the application and then never look back.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a different story where I had applied to YC with my previous company, but we were quite far along. So they made us the YC offer and we didn't want to take it because it was just not right. And I kind of was like, you know what, when I start my next company, I'm going to go do YC and I'm going to start in the beginning. And I totally forgot about it until one day I was like, wait, this is a new company and YC should be happening. So I went and I looked it up and it was already late. So I submitted a late application anyway, thinking nothing's going to happen. But they asked for an interview and it was pretty fun. Okay, so there's a bunch of questions that are coming in. I'm going to just start asking them and then jump in. So the first question is, does YC accept solo founders?
Yeah, I'm a solo founder. Absolutely. I think like if let's say if your idea is, okay, I'm solving, ChatGPT for financial models and you're not a technical founder, then they're going to question that and they're going to say, okay, who's your co-founder? But if you've got that skill set, I'm a solo founder.
I think there are other, just from Pakistan, there's another example of Safi who runs Byte, also being a solo founder. So I think we have two examples from Pakistan. You can absolutely be a solo founder as far as you have the relevant sort of skill set required to solve the problem that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So then there you have it, right? You have a solo founder on this call. Does YC accept solo founders? We've got that. Do references matter for YC applications?
What do you mean by references? Is it like emails? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so. I think there's a thing in the application somewhere. There was something where you had to put in names of references. that they will call and ask. But I don't think they care that much about references, frankly. I think they care about what you're building and whether it's got any legs on it, or it will have any legs on it. Everything else is completely secondary. So yeah, references. I think if I know a founder in my group who had so YC called his references and they asked him a bunch of questions and things like that. And I think part of the reason was that he had quite a lot of traction already in his product. So I think they just wanted to make sure that it was what it was. But like most companies that are applying to YC are pretty early, so there really isn't much in terms of traction to verify. So I think in most cases, it doesn't matter as much. Yeah. Okay, so I think you kind of, Salman, you alluded to this, but the next question is, what's the importance of having a technical co-founder?
Yeah, so I think that if you're working on a product that requires a certain level of skill set in terms of engineering, I think it's obviously an excellent thing to have a engineering co-founder. And I think this is what YC emphasizes on as well. If you're building a product that requires you to code and requires you to sit down and build products that have a certain engineering element, it's always it's always really good to have a technical co-founder. And I feel I remember at the point in time when I applied that we always thought that if we wanted to build a product that had some form of a technology angle, which most products do, we needed to have a technology co-founder as a part of our team. Otherwise, we might be caught napping in terms of solving for the product that you're trying to make. So I think there is good emphasis on that.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a bias for teams with technical skills, because the way it works is during the program, we are building things every week and testing them and trying them out. So if you don't have somebody building it, or you can't build it yourself, then the lead time to be able to take something that you've discovered and take it to the next step, it just can't be done in a week if you're going to work with somebody else or some agency or outsourced partner or something like that. I think that's the, they are quite, they're all technical folks anyway. So I think they lean heavily towards technical co-founders. But, again, there's no like 100% answer, because there was a bunch of people in our group that weren't that technical, but they were solving a very niche problem and they were experts in that area, right? So I think technical basically means you have specific knowledge that you can apply that other people won't be able to. Okay, so the most popular question is solo founder. It's like come in 3-4 times. So yes, you can apply as a solo founder. Salman is a solo founder. There's another Pakistani solo founder. And it's kudos to you, man. I don't know how solo founders do it, but I mean, my humble suggestion is if you can get a co-founder, get one, because it ain't fun.
I also think that it also depends on the kind of stage that you're in, right? So if, let's say, for example, you already have some form of proof and you've gone beyond a certain point in time, or you already have a team that's working on the technology side of the product, you can still probably get in being a solo founder. But if, let's say, for example, you're starting from the scratch and you want to build something that requires a technology stack, then obviously I think it becomes a lot more difficult. And I completely agreed with Ali. I mean, please do try to find a co-founder. Otherwise, it can be extremely difficult.
And one interesting thing, I don't know how many people know about this, but YC actually has a co-founder matching tool, right?
Yeah.
That you can apply, even if you're not part of the YC cohort, you can go and sign up on their, I think it's called, what is it called? Work at Startup or something like that. They've got another, another program, a startup school it's called. And you can just register your profile there, put yourself in as a potential co-founder. So that's another way to kind of get accepted or get into YC is you become a co-founder to someone who's been accepted already.
Yeah. By the way, the questions are amazing. I don't know who's asking them because I'm getting them from Ali and Talha's name, but they're fantastic questions. So please keep them coming. The next question is, how many customer interviews did you complete prior to applying?
Um, I think I had talked to more than 300 people by the time that I had, applied to YC. And that was just because of the fact that when we started working on, the idea that we wanted to go for, we just wanted to be really sure in terms of the kind of problems that we would be solving. So as an idea, we understood it, but then the smaller problems that uh, that are associated with the larger problem that you're trying to solve was extremely important. And it felt like, doing assisted e-commerce for Pakistan. So we just wanted to know if that market actually existed. So I remember my original phone number to this date, I think, is with more than 2,000 people by now. And, people who joined Markaz in the first month still message me and give me feedback on it. So, I talked to a lot of people before I had applied.
That's awesome. Actually, one idea that I had here is I think we should also say what type of customer segment we target, right? So I'm a B2B company. So for me to talk to 300 people would be quite insane.
Yeah.
In addition, in time to apply for YC. But for a consumer, I think yours is a consumer-facing product, right? Or prosumer? How do you describe your customer?
Yeah. So basically, since I said that we're like a reselling marketplace, what we enable is that we ensure that people who come onto the platform, they get access to thousands of products. We try to source those products at a wholesale rate. And those people can then use different medias like, Facebook, WhatsApp, and other social media to sell those products basis a certain amount of profit that they want to earn on top. So if you find a product worth ₹1,000, you can probably sell it for 1,200 within your community using different social media channels. So when I say customer, I'm talking about both the resellers that, come onto my platform and also the customers that they sell to. So we're like, a B2B2C player by design, which is why it was possible for us to have. And mind you, I probably was not the only one talking to these customers. We're like 4 co-founders at that point in time. It was me and Umair, another co-founder, who were doing the major conversation with different customers.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. So B2B, B2B2C, and Salman, how do you describe your customer segment?
B2B as well. So again, not possible to maybe speak to like 2,000 customers, but I thought I was doing customer interviews, but I realized that was just sales, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm speaking to so many people, because at that time the team was small. I was doing founder-led sales. And I think YC taught me, okay, what's the difference between a sales pitch and what's the difference between an actual customer interview? So to answer this question, I think before YC, I did 0 customer interviews, truthfully. And post YC, I've been doing, 10 to 15 a week.
Amazing. Okay, so pre-YC, you thought you were doing customer interviews, but you weren't really doing customer interviews.
It was like sales pitch, like shoving it down the throat, right? Saying, this is what I built, you need it.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, okay, what do you need?
I know exactly where you're coming from. So very similar story. Okay, the next question is, does YC accept idea stage startups?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was Markaz was an idea stage startup at the point in time that we applied. I remember, I believe we had started to do some form of an offline selling kind of a model, but we were absolutely idea stage. I remember putting in my application that we'd have our first MVP ready in another 2 to 3 weeks. So we were idea stage.
I think I don't want to speak on behalf of YC, but I would think that if you're applying as an idea stage, the founders should have some hustle in them to prove that they can take this idea forward, right? Because if you've got traction, then it's fine. But I think if you're like, look, I've just got this idea, and if they look at your application, they say that this person has got hustle and they'll figure it out. Why not?
Yeah, I think you said it right. I think YC has a strong bias for action. So you may have an idea, but if you're like Shoaib and you've spoken to thousands of people to validate that idea, it's very different from here's an idea, but I haven't done anything much beyond that. So I think what they're looking for really is, are you going to be able to dig in and really take this idea to a finished product and a successful company? And have you figured out if this idea is something that people align with? It's something people want. And I think they're really, during the interviews as well, they really push to figure that part out. Okay, so the next related question is, were you able to gauge product market fit prior to applying?
I did not even know what product market fit was before I got into IC. I mean, I knew what retention was. I mean, I knew, what traffic was, but trying to sort of really understand what PMF means and how do you actually, how there's a way of gauging it mathematically. Everybody, sort of tells you one thing or the other, but there are mathematical ways to understand for B2B, B2C companies. I had no idea what product market fit was until I, became part of IC.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I looked at growth and you see the chart going up and you say, okay, perfect. Like I've got PMF. But then you realize, okay, what PMF actually is. It's the growth, fine, it's a byproduct of it, but that's not product market fit.
Yeah, I think if you're already at product market fit, you probably don't need YC. Is kind of my opinion. So I think their motto is like perfect, right? Like every t-shirt says build something people want. And I think the further along you are on building something people want, the more likely you are to get in. But I think it's unrealistic for most companies. I'm sure there's outliers to already be at product market fit before they get to YC. Okay, cool. What was the trickiest part of the application?
I think
it was the video, right? Like trying to get it in that 1 minute, like at least at our time, I don't know what it is now, but at our time, like it was 1 minute. And they don't give too much guidance. So just trying to figure out, okay, what does that 1 minute video have to have? That was for me, maybe, personally, the trickiest part.
Yeah, so similarly, I remember that I think our video, it wasn't actually a minute long. It was slightly longer. I think it was like, maybe 80 seconds or 85 seconds long. And so we were 4 founders, and the 4 of us at that point in time were in different geographies. One was in Malaysia, I was in Pakistan, one was in Myanmar, one was in Belgium. So getting together and trying to make that video, I still remember that, we used to stay up till like, late for like 2-3 days trying to figure out how to ensure that that video sort of gets shortened to a minute. But I think that was a tricky part. For me, another tricky part was also sort of figuring out the kind of hack that I had, worked on, or what was the sort of the most important hack. That was probably the part of the application that I wasn't really confident about. So those two for me were probably the trickiest.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think the video was hard to make because, obviously we were very early, so we didn't really know what the product did or the right words. So like to really condense it into like a minute and also introduce yourself and your co-founder was challenging. And then the hack part is also like, I think a lot of the questions are quite thoughtful. So they also email you your application answers. So you have them there. And I often, once in a while, I'll go back and read them and be like, oh yeah, okay, this is kind of like what we're doing this. Okay, good. Yeah. Or like, that's funny that we said this and now we don't do this anymore at all. One related kind of question on here, and I'm kind of jumping around between questions now, but like, can you give us any tips on creating the introductory video, like the tone and what info it should have?
Salman?
There's a lot on YouTube actually, like, because most of the videos are private, like at least, I don't know about you, but like you share private link, but a lot of people post a public one. And there's some really cool ones, right? Like DoorDash, right? To see them, whatever it was, like, I don't know how many years ago, to see them doing their YouTube video, like there's some really cool ones out there. So I think if you see enough YouTube videos, you get it. But I would say that the video should be exactly like how YC is, which is short, to the point, one-liners, explain it simple, and what's the product and why you're the right person to do it.
Yeah, I think being concise in that video is probably the biggest challenge, right? So trying to figure out what you need to say within a minute is probably the most important thing. I remember when we made our video, we thought that, it's probably not going to cut it because we were too embarrassed about the video that we had made at that point in time. But I think that Salman rightly said, there's a lot of founders who put up their videos, and it's important to sort of talk about the aspects of what you're trying to do in a quick manner, right? Trying to maybe figure out 3 or 4 main things, what the problem is, how you're trying to solve, what your basic background is, or if there's any traction that you already have. I think these are the 4 or 5 most important things that you need to touch upon when working on that video, and do not be embarrassed about it. Everybody makes like really crappy videos.
Yeah. I think one practical tip was that my co-founder and I were both in the same city. So we decided to meet up and record the video in person, which made it a lot easier because like doing it on Zoom, I know like we tried to do it once on Zoom and we're like, well, we're like half an hour away, so we should just meet up. So that made it a lot better because we could sort of sync a little bit more as a practical tip. Another one was that we just started a Google Doc and we said, this is what we're going to say. And that helped kind of condense it a lot more. It helped us throw away a lot of like filler words or buzzy kind of words that sounded smart, but didn't really mean anything. So I think one of the best things about YC is that they are very clear and concise about what they're looking for. So they have example videos on their website. They have a bunch of them on YouTube. So the best thing about YC is that there's no like secrets. Like you just have to do the work. You just have to go and read the instructions and watch the videos. Yeah, there's no like secret information. I mean, we're doing this talk to kind of tell you that there's no secret information, I guess.
There's actually like YC videos on how to get into YC, right? Like by the actual, like, some of the partners. So they're very open.
Yeah. And I think that's like the most beautiful part about it, right? It really focuses on making people formidable founders. And there's really no time for like anything else, right? Just focus on your business, build something people want, and that's it. Okay, so this question, is it okay if you have outsourced tech? We don't have any outsourced tech, but maybe you guys do, so you can comment on it.
I mean, I think the question should be that, does it impact, right? Like if it doesn't impact, who cares? If you're still able to produce at the same level of cost and you're still able to work fast, and I don't think they would care.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that they care. I think what matters the most is that they should be able to, like Salman said earlier as well, that they should be able to see that you're sort of resourceful enough to get things done, right? I mean, even if you've outsourced your tech, and let's say, for example, it doesn't come at a lot of cost, I think that's perfectly fine. It works. Yeah.
Again, I think it doesn't matter. I think what matters is what you're building and whether it's going to go somewhere, outsourced tech or not. It doesn't matter. Okay, the next question is, in which areas does YC help startups? So a little broad, but I guess maybe you could list the top 3 areas where you got the most help when you were at YC.
I think that like it has the ability to be quite personal. So there's obviously like the generic bigger topics, right? Of, things like product market fit, things like fundraising strategies. But at the same time, you have your group partners. So it depends where you want your help in. So I needed help in 2 or 3 very specific areas, and then we just double down on those every week. So which areas do they help with? I think it depends on you, right? Like what your problems. If your problem is hiring, right? Or your problem is retaining, or your problem is product market fit or pricing or whatever it is. I think, you just, as long as it's a real problem and you show that you're willing to act on their advice, any problem. I think it's also important to see the program like sort of in a manner that you get assistance on whatever you actually want assistance on, like Salman said. Throughout the 10, 12 weeks, what matters the most is that you should understand where do you want to go. They'll help you. Like, for example, when you get into YC, they'll help you set goals. You'll figure out, okay, this is where I want to go. It doesn't really matter. During the program, you might figure out that initially you
needed help with building product. By the time that maybe you're 6 weeks into the program, you might need help with completely something else. So for example, for us, one of the things that we really needed help was trying to figure out how to make search work within the app, right? So that's something that we sort of doubled down on. But it depends on you. They help you figure out how to be scrappy. They help you figure out how to unlock powers that you have, and you probably are not really, you're not really confident in sort of exhibiting them. They help you figuring out how to make your product, how to talk to investors. They help you figure out, how to go for, raising money. So it entirely depends on you. And the entire program is sort of structured in a way that they start you off with a particular at a particular point, and they take you towards demo day where you go for fundraising. So it depends on you.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I like here is that a lot of their knowledge on like how to raise money, how to sell, how to do a customer interview, a lot of that is available in a wiki, and you can just read it, right? So the assumption is that you've read everything and you read the book, so you have base knowledge on how to do something. And then the time with the partners is basically solving higher order problems, right? One. Two, I think YC partners are probably the best at giving the most unfiltered, direct feedback on your product or your number one problem. So like, I mean, routinely, this would happen is like you would go into an office hour and a partner would say, what's your number one problem? And you would say, my number one problem is X. And they're like, I don't think so. Your number one problem should be this, because I've seen like 20 companies like yours come through. They always get stuck on this. And this is really not a problem. So why are you solving the easy problem? Like solve the hard problem. This is a hard problem. And I think that is really, really helpful, because for a lot of other places, just people don't give you that harsh feedback. It's not like harsh in terms of mean or anything like that, but really what they're trying to do is diagnose kind of like where your startup will die. And every week you're trying to like, find a new way to take one risk off the table. So I think that's super interesting. I'm going to ask two questions. We can ask them all together. What are the most valuable lessons you learned from your time at YC? And has the YC network been helpful to you post YC?
You want to go first, Shoaib?
Yeah, so YC has been super helpful post YC as well. I mean, that is probably one of the coolest things about YC. You're on a Slack group with your YC group partners. You can message them, you can ask them for help. If you're growing, if you're doing well, they're going to reach out to you themselves. They're going to, talk about what your future plans are. How are you thinking about fundraising? How are you solving problems for? So that's post YC. I think within YC, again, it depends on you as to what you find the most valuable part. But I think that the way that we did YC, for us, the most valuable thing was that we always had someone to actually go and ask for help. If there was a single problem that we sort of landed on irrespective, we had firstly, like a great pool of knowledge that's already available that you can read through. There are sources that are available within YC, and then your group partners. I mean, two of my group partners had built billion-dollar companies. One of them had built a few $100 million company and had sold it off. Their knowledge was, probably 10 years ahead of me. And I think that's also one of the most important things as founders when you're going to YC, that you need to be honest with yourself and understand that the group partners are being as honest with you to ensure that you do the best. It's not about them. It's not about YC. It doesn't matter. It's about who you are and how you can do the best.
That's very well said. Yeah. I think that's like spot on.
I don't think I can add anything to that. Yeah, ditto.
Okay, we'll just keep moving because there's a lot of questions. I'm gonna try to get through as many as I can. So, will YC help in fundraising for your startup? Yes.
Hell yes.
I think it's not like they're not going to, but I think I think hell yes, they will help with fundraising. Yeah. But they will basically make you ready to be investable. So they're not going to like be there in the pitch meeting with you or whatever it may be, but they will basically figure out all the objections that an investor is likely to have. They will remove them by working with you, like on your pitch, on your customer demographic, on whatever the problem may be, so that by the time you get to the investor, the first 10 things that they're going to say no to are already addressed. So you have a much higher chance of getting in, right? Well,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
think, yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Salman, please.
I think so. I definitely asked this question like really early on, right? To my YC partners is, guys, like, where's the help on fundraising, right? What's going on? We're talking about all these other things, like, we're here for fundraising. And one of the best advice I got was the best way to fundraise is build a good business, right? Build a business, money comes. So they will help you build a good business. And that then leads to fundraising. Fine. It might lead to an exit without ever having to raise a dollar. It might lead to something else, right? There's multiple different ways of thinking of success. Success is not just fundraising, but build a good business. That's what they're going to help you do.
Just to add on to that, I think, and I get asked this question outside of, in general as well by a lot of aspiring founders. It's very important to understand that YC will will help you fix your own path. It's not about sort of taking you down a path. It's not about holding your hand. It's not about saying, okay, these are the 5 people that you should go and ask, money from. They're going to ensure that you are investable as a company. You understand what an investment means by somebody else. What is it that you need to ensure that you need to know about your company to be able to get to that point? I think it's extremely important to understand that you know your company the best. And also they'll help you with the minutest of things. Like, for example, I remember a story from Nicola, who's one of my group partners, who's the founder of Algolia. It's the second largest sort of search engine after Google in terms of searches, because it's a B2B search product. And I remember him running around helping this founder raise money. He needed like $1.5 million USD. And he would just write emails every day to different people, because he knew that he was investable, and he knew that he had changed the way that he was probably pitching earlier and did not have it really figured out. But the moment that they think, or maybe the moment that they thought that the founder had figured out, they went out of their way to ensure that those that the founder got the right kind of exposure to the right kind of investors.
Yeah, I think one big thing for me, as you were speaking, Shoaib, that came to mind is like, Michael Seibel would always say, and Michael Seibel was our group partner, and it was so hard because he's piercing in his feedback. But like, he would basically say, look, we've already invested in your company, so we don't need you to like us. We actually need you to be successful, and we want you to be successful and build a great business. All the other people that have not invested in your business right now, or will not, are going to give you a bunch of reasons that have nothing to do with the reason why they're not investing. So they're professional, nice people. In case your startup becomes a hit later, they don't want you to be like, I don't like that guy because he told me my startup was a bad idea or something. So they'll just tell you kind of like very blankety, you're too early for us kind of crap. And I think that's really the insight, right? Like, people can do like 10, 20 investor meetings and never learn why they are getting rejected. And because like guys like Michael Seibel and Nicola and everybody else at YC has seen this so many times, they can really look at a company and be like, the problem is this. There's a problem on the demand side. There's a problem on this side. There's a regulatory problem. And then instead of like dancing around it, you just address it and you say, look, here's a problem and here's what I've done to fix it. Okay, so this is interesting as a question. Does YC show any bias for grads of elite schools?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
That's because to be really honest, I've seen people from across the globe, from different kinds of universities. It did not matter. I mean, I wouldn't claim that we were like that. I mean, I went to Lungs. One of my co-founders went to IBA. We're probably, the two most elite, or two of the elitist institutions in Pakistan. But one of my co-founders was from Islamic University here in Islamabad, which is probably not considered one of the elite institutions in Pakistan. So I don't think that there is bias, because there are a lot of people who went to school and are dropping out of it to be part of YC. So they want to understand again that you have the grit to sort of build a business, because building a business is not just about the idea. Once you've gotten the idea, even if you hit product market fit, beyond that, the amount of grit that it takes every day to show up and ensure that that product market fit remains the exact same way, it requires a lot of grit. So they look at that, I think. And then they, like I said, they look at you being resourceful. And then at the same time, it doesn't really matter which school you went to, as far as you're working on something that people want.
Yeah, I think it's very, my experience is very much the opposite of who cares where you went to school. If you're building something useful, great.
Yeah.
And if you are not, then no school is going to save you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is interesting. Does education level make a difference? I'm a high school student with an incubated startup, so I'll be a freshman. Would YC disqualify my application for lack of qualification? No, I think a bunch of people have been through YC that came straight from high school, so doesn't matter.
I think one thing that matters, Ali, beyond this is that you need to have a big enough idea and a big enough market. I think that's extremely important. I mean, you wouldn't want to build a business that probably has a TAM of like, a few tens of millions of dollars, right? That probably does not make sense to YC. So you need to have a big market size that you're going after. Be mindful of the fact that YC ideally wants you to be the most successful company in your own domain. They want you to be the world beater that you can be. So they're going to look at ideas which can scale to that level, and they're going to look at people who can probably try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next question is, our team has two different ideas. Can we submit both for consideration?
I mean, I would definitely submit one with more of kind of a clear focus, right? And then I think there's a part saying, is there any other idea you would submit this application on, right? And that's like an afterthought. But having said that, there are a lot of companies that pivot during YC. So just because you apply with an idea doesn't mean you come out with that idea. And there are things like Airbnb, Coinbase, OpenSea, like all of these great companies that are examples of that. So as long as the idea you apply with shows that you've got the right mindset and you're thinking about the problem correctly, but I wouldn't be half-hearted and say, I'm thinking of this and I'm thinking of this. Go with one with conviction, and then in that afterthought, whatever 160 characters of is there any other idea, maybe put that in. But in the interview also, just be more straightforward.
When you're sort of applying to YC, I think what matters is that the way that they look at your application is that it look at a lot of clarity as to what exactly do you want to build. They specifically ask you to enter other ideas that you might want, that you might be interested in. I think the reason for that is that the idea sort of helps you get to YC, but YC invests in people. So once they've invested in you, it's extremely important for them to make you successful. So if you have to, let's say, for example, pivot and do completely something else, they're going to help you do that. Because once you're in, that means that they think that you're worth it. Your idea, the way that you were trying to do it was worth it. Doesn't work out or didn't work out, there isn't good traction in the beginning, and you want to sort of pivot to something else, sure, you can do that. So I think that it's also important to look at that they invest in people more so than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. They invest in people over ideas, but having a very well fleshed out idea that you've put in a bunch of work to is a surefire way of sort of moving forward. And the converse is also true. If you have an idea but you haven't done anything about it, then YC is not going to accept you because you haven't done. If you haven't done the stuff that you don't need YC for, then I think it would be a mistake on their part to take you. Okay, this is interesting. Why did you choose YC, and how does it compare against Techstars versus SOSV versus Plug and Play?
Salman?
I wouldn't know because I've never really looked at those programs, so I'm not sure like what's the kind of strengths, weaknesses. But like I would just choose YC, or I chose YC not over those, but I just chose YC because of the alumni, right? Like some of the companies that I look up to are all ex-YC founders.
Similar for me. I mean, at the point in time that I was applying, I did not even know what SOSC was or what plug and play was. I got to know about Techstars, probably during my YC batch. But one of the reasons for us was that when we started to research on, how to like build things early in a startup, we landed on a lot of Paul Graham essays, and they're like a gold mine. If anybody wants to understand how to talk to users, how to understand where your users are coming from, what kind of values you want to build a product for, or whether your product has value in it intrinsically. I think Paul Graham's essays are absolutely brilliant. So that's why we just knew YC and we applied.
Yeah, +1 to Paul Graham's essays. I think whether you apply to YC or not, I think those are fantastic to read. Regardless, I would encourage everybody to go read them. His books are also fantastic. So, I mean, if you get a chance to try and read his books as well, they're awesome. Okay, so again, blanket statement, it does not really matter what university you go to. And if your company is focused in Pakistan, that's totally fine, because, we're doing this webinar to encourage more people who are in Pakistan and building companies for Pakistan to apply.
I'm Pakistan focused, yeah.
And, I think, again, Pakistan is a big enough market. So if you are building something that's going to become the winner, there's a lot of people and a lot of interest. Okay, so can you guys help with mock interviews or share your application as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mock interviews, highly encourage it, right? Like, I did mock interviews with a couple of YC alums. So please, just, drop at least, I'm sure I'm speaking for Shoaib and Ali, but I'm sure they'll also be willing to, just drop like a DM on Twitter or whatever it is, and happy to schedule that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I would, when I was applying to YC, I actually did get a chance to do a lot of mock interviews. I spoke to, I remember the founders at SafePay, Ziad, and I spoke to Safi at Byte, and Ziad and Safi was super helpful. But beyond that, I didn't really get a chance to speak to a lot of people. I would be glad to help as many people as one. Just drop a DM on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm the same way. I think the fun part about YC is that the community is incredibly helpful. Like everybody will, it doesn't matter who they are, like if they've had $1 billion exit, if you ask them nicely and you kind of do it in a way that doesn't take up too much of their time, people are very helpful and flexible in terms of all kinds of questions. So yeah, happy to do that as well. I think the average YC founder probably does like 2-3 mock interviews every session, right? So totally happy to do that. Okay, what is the minimum TAM and annual revenue you need to be considered for YC?
0 annual revenue.
0 annual revenue.
Yeah.
And humongous TAM.
Yeah. Or fast growing TAM, really, right? Like, for me, my TAM was maybe not like large enough compared to US SaaS or something like that. And that was something that I was maybe also not sure about. But if you can show that your TAM is growing really, really rapidly, then that's also really good.
So I think that just adding on to Salman, I mean, he's building modern logistics, right? So if e-commerce in Pakistan by design grows, Salman's company has the option of growing, right? So it's an increasing TAM. I think that's the most important thing to sort of look at, and it's important to be smart about building your TAM. Don't overstate it. If you figure out what your TAM is, and let's say, for example, it's a couple of $1 billion, don't try to make it a couple of tens of billions of dollars. Doesn't make sense. Be very realistic, because trust me, the guys at YC, they're super smart, right? So they will know whether that TAM actually is the actual TAM. I mean, I remember going into the interview and they knew about the Pakistani market. I've worked with executives in Pakistan and the corporate sector who probably know 1/10 of those YC interviews, right? So interviewers. So it's very important. And revenue, we had 70,000 PKR in sales, forget revenues, per week. So we had like 0 revenues. It didn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you have revenue, by all means, share it.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Zabardast, wo to bahut acha hai.
Yeah. Like, great. But I think, don't wait till revenue to apply to YC, because you're probably going to It's going to take a lot longer because they'll teach you a bunch of stuff that'll get to the revenue quicker. Okay, what is the success rate for YC companies? This is an interesting question. I don't know the answer myself. Like, what percentage of YC companies do very well? Not too many, actually. The startups actually mostly fail.
So from what I understand, I think they're like, I don't know the exact number. I remember reading it somewhere. I can be completely wrong on this. But there are more than like 6,000 YC startups, across the past 10 years or so. You can probably go to the YC website and figure out how many of those are doing really well. They simply state it on their website what the top public companies are, what the top private companies are. So you can sort of get an idea how many companies are doing really well. But those are the ones that are doing really, really well. There are others who are probably not listed there but are still doing really well. I can maybe talk about how many get successfully to the YC program. I think the acceptance rate is close to, I think it varies between 2 to 4%. Like if 100 companies give an interview, maybe 2 to 4 get in. When it comes to success beyond YC, I don't think anybody has those stats, or there might be those. I mean, I'm not really aware of whether those stats.
And also, what's success, right? Like, how do you define success? Also, I think that it varies, right? Like for someone, maybe a $30 million exit is not a success, and and a $5 billion IPO is. So yeah, I think it's tough to say, but instead of thinking maybe about success of YC startups, it's exactly what Ali was saying, is figuring out where your startup will die. Like, draw a timeline. YC helps you draw a timeline between now and 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And the formula is simple. The longer you survive, the higher probability of success. It's that simple. So every day you survive, you've increased your chance of success.
Yeah. Okay, great answers. Okay, this is an interesting question. We were not considered for an interview for Winter 22. Should we bother reapplying?
Yes.
Absolutely yes. The two gentlemen on this call are incredibly awesome that they got in on their first attempts. For the typical person, it usually takes 2 to 3 attempts to get in. So don't use that as a benchmark. If you don't get selected, feel free to. They usually write you some email, but feel free to if you want to, one of us is happy to take a look at it and help you figure out where to improve it. But yeah, like a lot of people will apply multiple times before they get in.
And just show what you've done between then and now. Maybe that also helps, right? Saying, since I last applied, this is what I've done.
And remember, guys, that probably, like Ali said, I know of people who applied, like in my batch, I remember in my cohort, there were like people who had applied 8 or 9 times before they got in. And people are really, like, they want to get to YC usually because they think that they know how to build product, or probably then they don't know 3, 4 other things. Some of them really know how to do other things, and they probably don't know how to build product in a consistent manner. So it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. Try to apply again and again. I think I was extremely, extremely lucky that we got in the first time. But it's also important for you guys to sort of really put the hours in on the application and be really thoughtful when you're writing down those answers. I think that really matters.
Awesome. So this is a really good question. We have like 5 minutes or so left. So this is for the two of you. How did you perform market research for Pakistan-focused startup where the data isn't readily available?
I can comment about mine. So when it came to TAM, let's say for example, figuring out what the total addressable market in Pakistan was, there's something called the Pakistan Household Survey. It gives you a lot of detail in terms of where the market is, what kind of total, let's say for example, retail size in Pakistan is, what sector is it in. So for us that was important. Secondly, when it came to direct research, I went to Lahore, went to Faisalabad, stayed there for a couple of days, went out into the market, talked to people directly. When it comes to research on your own product or your own problem, it's extremely important not to rely on secondary sources. I think it's extremely, extremely important going and directly talking to your users. So I remember there's something, there's a Ghanta Ghar in Faisalabad, which has 8 different markets which point to different cities. I remember spending like 9-10 hours in those markets for an entire week talking to suppliers, trying to figure out what their problems were. So we went on ground, and it's important for you guys to understand that if there is a problem worth solving, you'll see a pattern emerge from the people that you're having a conversation with. And you might go in trying to solve one problem, but when you'll have a conversation, you'll figure out that probably not this, but this or something else adjacent to that, or something completely different is a much larger problem for people to solve. So, going on ground, really talking to your customers is extremely important. Don't rely on any fancy data that you get.
Awesome. Slam dunk.
Agreed. Yeah. Slam dunk again.
Yeah, Shoaib, we should just put Shoaib on YouTube and prompt him the questions, and that's it. But I think
guys.
What Shoaib is saying, and I mean he's like living example here. I think the one thing that YC will say over and over to people, and the reason why they have to say it over to people is because it's really uncomfortable, is that you have to go and talk to your customers. You have to go talk to your users. And every YC company will get yelled at by the partners for talking to customers, whether it's Airbnb or whether it's us or anybody else. I don't know, there's just some natural aversion to talking to customers that you just have to cross it,
I think, Ali, just one last point on that. I think because this is probably one of the most important things. Your customers might hate you as well at points in time. They might swear at you. They might tell you to just, not be in their face. And you need to understand that that's the most important thing. You need to understand what gets them to be passionate enough when you're, let's say, for example, trying to solve a problem. So you have to cross that barrier. You have to kill your ego. I think that's extremely important.
Yeah. Okay, Salman, this is for you. Did you have beta customers prior to launching? If not, how did your thinking around customer acquisition / retention change post YC?
Yeah, I mean, so we've always been scrappy. We had beta customers when we started, and then we transitioned them over. But I think the way we started our thinking changed post YC was every time we launched a new product, we would have beta customers within that product, right? So, before YC, it was like we needed to get things right. So we had a couple of test customers, and then we had to get it right, and then we had to roll it out. And then everything new that came out had to be really perfect, because in our heads, we had people using our platform and depending on it and thinking that we were really important. But then the way our mind changed was, okay, if there's something new, again, go back to day zero, get a beta customer for that and talk to them, as Shoaib said, talk to your customers and then launch.
Awesome. Okay, so this will be our last question because we're right at time. What is the best way for people to reach you guys to schedule mock interviews or ask you questions about whatever else they weren't able to ask today?
So you guys can just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send a DM. Would be glad to help as much as I can. And we can if this requires obviously more time, then we can schedule an online meet and we can take it from there. So happy to help anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, super happy to help anyone. I've got 4 followers on Twitter. So if you reach out on Twitter, it'll probably stand out. I'll get a notification, I'll reply right away. But yeah, if not, LinkedIn or through Ali or through wherever it is. Please do reach out. Yeah. And maybe we can learn from you, right? Maybe we've got questions and maybe one of you can be one of our customers as well. So yeah, reach out.
Yeah, definitely. So somebody had asked, I'm just going to for a minute. Somebody had asked if social media presence is important to get into YC. Clearly it's not, because Salman has 4 followers and he's still kicking it all the way. I'm on Twitter at Ali Nawab. So feel free to message me there or, LinkedIn or whatever it may be. Happy to help. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you taking the time out on a Sunday evening. Really awesome. Really good to see you guys too. It's been such a long time.
It's been a long time. Good to see you guys. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for organizing this. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, Shoaib.
Thank you
so much, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck. Bye.